Good morning, everyone. I'm really super pumped to be talking about this particular issue. I think it is a subject that simply isn't getting enough airtime these days. And it's certainly a topic that I think is crucial for both the employer and workers to be thinking about and being engaged in that conversation these days. So let's jump right into it. My first slide here says organizations that are more age ready than their competitors will likely have a significant strategic advantage. So what is it that I mean by that? Well, in other words, I think there is a tremendous opportunity here to capitalize on the growing number of workers that want to continue working past what we would consider to be that traditional retirement age of 65. And for just a few stats here so that we're all on the same page and we know what we're referring to, of course, when we're talking about the older workers, we're talking about baby boomers born between 1946 and 1965. And those first baby boomers reached that age of 55 in 2001. So just carrying on where we we're just looking at a few stats. We talked about the fact that baby boomers reached the age of 55 in 2001. And young workers are considered between the ages of 25 and 34. Now, why I bring that one up is simply to say that, well, the number of young workers, there we go. Well, the number of young workers has increased 18% between 1996 and 2018. The number of older workers has tripled, and that's made it pretty significant. Combined with that as well, we have that declining birth rate. So that has triggered, if you will, these labor shortages that we have in the workplace. And if we look at this next slide here, we can see that close to 1 in 4 people in the labor force is 55 or older. And that number is projected to continue over the next several years for sure. Now that brings us to our first poll question. And the question here is, how many of you know someone? Now, I know we had talked about people being 55, but how many of you know someone that is 65, that normal retirement age, and are still continuing to work in the workplace? Okay, there we've got our answer. 69% of you know someone that is at least 65 or beyond and continuing to work in the workplace. So as I said, these numbers are growing almost exponentially, it seems. So we'll just close that off. And we'll move on. And here's the kind of neat thing is there's lots of reasons for people to want to keep working in the workplace. Number one, I would say is pension top-ups. As many of you know, we have different types of pension plans in Canada. One is called a defined benefit plan. And if you're fortunate enough to be an employee that has that type of a pension plan, it simply means that at the end of the day, when you go to retire, based on the number of years that you worked for an organization and a whole calculation that goes into it, you will have a certain amount of dollars that will be paid out to you for the rest of your life. And there are becoming fewer and fewer of those types of plans throughout Canada. Another one is called the defined contribution plan. That type of plan simply has a pot of money, if you will, that's there at the end of the day. And when that pot of money is used up, there's nothing left in your pension plan. And then, of course, as we know, there are many people, of course, in Canada today that have no pension plans at all. So if we have that ability to top up our pensions, if you will, or our investments, that's certainly a great reason to want to keep working. Social contact is another, for many people, that is the single biggest source of their social contact in their life. And they simply want to continue that on. Sometimes I think as we get older, maybe gets a little bit harder to either activate or maintain those social contacts. Giving back is another one. Some of the people that have worked for 25, 30, maybe 35 years industry have a lot of information and a lot of knowledge, a lot of experience, and they want to be able to give that back and share that knowledge in some way. So that could be with their existing organization or company, or perhaps even with a different organization. And they want to stay active. And again, for a lot of people, their work is their activity. And so they want to keep on doing that. They're not quite in a position where they want to start going off and necessarily trying some new things. Many people want to start their own business, and we hear about that more and more. Maybe it's a passion of theirs that they've wanted to do. Perhaps it's a hobby that they want to turn into a business, or they simply want to again share or have that passion or change their hours to be something that it's closer to their heart. And then another one is they simply love what they do. It gives them a purpose in life. I have a neighbor that's exactly falls into this category. He's 69 years old. I asked him about when he was thinking of perhaps retiring, and he said almost exactly those words. He says, "No," he says, I love what I do. It gives me great meaning." He says, "I don't have a lot of social things that I do outside of work, so I want to continue to work as long as I can." And again, I'm hearing that message more and more from various people. And then this is, I think, one of the big ones here. We are living longer than ever before. And that's no surprise. In 1966, the average life expectancy was 56. Whoops. But here we go. In 2016, 50 years later, the average life expectancy now is 72. And in 2040, the average life expectancy is predicted to be 80 years of age. So we are living longer than ever before. And of course, we don't know exactly how long that's going to be. So again, it sort of lends itself toward that first reason to want to keep working and perhaps top up some of that pension plan. And to go along with that, of course, there are more opportunities today than ever before to continue working. Consulting is a big one that I hear about more and more. People want to get into the consulting business. And again, they've had years and years, decades of education and experience. And oftentimes they want to be able to leverage that or share that with other people. Flexible work schedules is certainly very popular. If people have more control over when they're going to be able to work and kind of pick and choose their own hours, it can be very, very helpful again, and it can be very exciting for a lot of people that are at that later stage in their life. Part-time work is also becoming more and more important, or more. There's more opportunities for it. Let's say I know of a bus driver who now when a bus needs a major overhaul, which is done in Winnipeg, he's subscribed to a list. There's a number of bus drivers that do this. They will fly them to Winnipeg. They will go there, pick up the bus that needs to be brought back to Vancouver, or vice versa. Sometimes they will take a bus that needs to have a complete overhaul. They will drive it to Winnipeg, and then they will fly back. And it's done on as sort of a on-call type of basis, and it's worked out very well for them. Job sharing is another one, and again, I'm hearing this more and more. The only caveat to job sharing is that you really need to have that right job share partner. You need to have someone that's very like-minded to yourself, I think, in order to make that work. But if you have the right job share partner, it can be a real win-win for the organization. Seasonal work is certainly, we're hearing that more and more. Again, I know of another individual, he works for an RV dealership. He leaves in October. This is pre-COVID, of course. He leaves generally in October, goes down to Mexico, comes back up here in April, and works for the rest of the season. Telecommuting, we probably don't need to talk about that too much, other than to say that more and more of us are doing it and hearing about it. Lots and lots of opportunity there. Again, I have a colleague that has his own business. He had an employee that came to him that wanted to resign because her husband had transferred up to Prince George. And after a couple of days, he had thought about this. The owner had thought about it and said, "Well, wait a minute. What if I could get you set up at home you really don't need to be in the office here. Everything that she does is on the phone and on the computer. And she agreed that if they could set her up in Prince George, she would be happy to do that. And what a perfect win-win, because he had a great employee that was thrilled to do it, and they didn't have to do any additional education or training. So a perfect win-win in a situation like that. And phased retirement is another one. We're hearing more about this, and I think I really love the idea of phased retirement. And I'll tell you why, because I think oftentimes if we've worked for, let's say, 30, 35, or 40 years, and if we've kind of been working in that traditional sort of 9 to 5, 4 or 5 days a week, I think it can be really difficult for a lot of people to go into a kind of a hard stop, if you will, and do nothing or not go into work every day. So that phased retirement can be very, very helpful, I think, for a lot of the older workforce. And that could be something like going from 5 days a week down to four for perhaps a year. And the following year, maybe you go down to 3 days a week, and then down to 2 days. So all kinds of different possibilities with regard to phased retirement. So now, having said all that, are there performance concerns related to the aging workers? I think you'll find this a little bit interesting here. Because here's some reasons for poor performance: lack of recognition, a feeling that their work isn't valued, not getting along well with supervisors, high job stress, and a lack of support. So if you think about this, it really has actually nothing to do with the aging or older workers. These are reasons that anybody at any age would have likely poor performance in the workplace. So it's right across the board, and it really has nothing to do with specifically the older worker. In fact, the older workers bring a tremendous amount of value to the workplace, and often that value that they bring it's not even tracked, or it can't be tracked in ways that we typically would track most performance of individuals. And so let's have a look at some of those things. The experienced workers will often lower the costs because they don't leave the organization. And I talked to a woman that works in HR for a very large organization, and she was directly responsible for the hiring in the organization. And I found this amazing. She said to me, if we hire someone today and that person stays at our organization for 5 years, we consider that a win. Isn't that amazing? I mean, I was floored when I heard that. And if you think about previous generations who oftentimes would stay with one company or maybe two at best for their entire lives, now it's looking much different. So if we have to continue to hire and again and again and again, you can imagine the costs associated with that. And those experienced workers are not likely to change. They're likely to stay in the same place. And as supervisors, they tend to retain and develop and engage those junior employees. And they do it much more, I would say, willingly, if you will. And so because they are so good as supervisors, they actually decrease the amount of time that other people would perhaps leave an organization. So again, it's just an all-around situation that creates a winning environment for everybody. So there's increased productivity, both for them and I think the people that are around them. They're very great on sharing knowledge, and that knowledge goes both ways. Younger people actually like to work with older experienced workers, and the older workers like to share the information and knowledge that they've gained. So it becomes that win-win. They strengthen group cohesion and collaboration and resiliency, and they also enable innovation, and they strengthen that customer connection. So again, lots of reasons that they are so valuable in the workplace. And again, these are oftentimes intangible. They're things that we don't normally think of when we're looking at performance evaluations. So if we kind of a little bit of a recap on that, we've got lower turnover, we've got greater dedication to the work, we've got positive work values, Generally, we have less frequent absenteeism, and the work is often more accurate because they're making more of the right decisions along the way. So the question might be then, well, okay, do older workers need any special accommodation? You might be a little surprised when I tell you the answer is a little bit of yes and a little bit of no. For some older workers, no special accommodations or accommodations at all would be needed. And for others, there may be some things that we need to certainly consider. Number one, and I think that for most organizations, we should be looking at these as an overall part of our strategic plan when it comes to hiring the older workers. But what are the cognitive demands of the job that we want them to do? So we need to have a look at that, coupled with what is the workplace environment? Are they driving all day? Are they out on the road? Are they in town? Are they doing long haul type of work? Or are they more in the dispatch side, perhaps in an office environment? And what are the physical capabilities that relate to the type of work that they're going to do or the task demands of the job? So a lot of organizations these days are compiling this list for the different task demands for all the different jobs they have. So they have that on hand, and it's much easier then to be able to compare a person's cognitive demands, the workplace environment, the physical capabilities, along with those task demands for that particular job. I'd be remiss if I didn't talk about some of those physical changes that can affect the older workers. So we'll just jump into that a little bit. Muscular strength, number one, just as a general rule, it's around 50-ish when we start to lose a little bit of muscle mass. And generally it's about 1% a year, or pardon me, I think it's around 0.5% a year. And that's whether you're working out or not. We're going to start to lose a little bit of our muscle strength. And again, this is not happening exactly when you hit 50, but somewhere in that realm, we start to lose some of that muscle strength. We will certainly start to lose some of our cardiovascular abilities. We're not going to be able to necessarily perform when we were in our 20s. And that can, not always, but it can affect some of our balance as well. And some of that may be related to sleep. And I think Mike touched on this in the earlier presentation. If we're not sleeping well, it can affect all of these particular things. But as we get older, as a general rule, sleep can become a little bit more difficult. Vision, of course, is a big one. As we get older, and most of you probably are already aware of this, peripheral vision starts to change as we get older. And again, this is very subtle. It's a very slow kind of process. Glare is another one, particularly at nighttime. Glare can become an issue, but certainly these are things that can be dealt with through medical and so forth. So they're not real big issues that we have to concern ourselves with too much. So the question then might be, okay, so where are the injuries coming from in this sector? And we can see very clearly from the graph here, we do have sprains and we have fractures as the two leading types of accidents that happen. But here's the big thing. Now, you've seen this slide once already. We talked about many of the reasons that we have such good performance from these workers. But here's the other thing. I put this one in red here because remember, we're making more of the right decisions along the way. We're actually having less accidents. We're not doing some of the things perhaps that we would have done or that we see other younger people do. We're simply not doing it at this age. And so we're actually having less of those types of accidents because we're giving more thought to the processes. So as it says here, that experienced workforce is that source of competitive advantage for the employer. And if we start thinking about embracing this now and really putting a plan together on how can we bring older people back into the workplace, or how can we retain them in our workplace, with that plan in place, we'll have some great results. And some of the ways we can do that, first of all, you want to collect and analyze your age profile data. You want to understand how many people are you going to have that are nearing that age of 65, how many people are perhaps even at 55, at 60, and at 65. When are they likely going to be at the point where they're wanting to perhaps retire? And you also want to give some thought as to what kind of skill and experience are you going to lose at that point. You want to initiate conversations with those experienced employees about how they might be able to stay in the workforce or to work in different ways that allow them to stay in the workforce. And I would say as well, if you're someone who is in the workforce now, but you're maybe getting close to that time when you're thinking about retiring, if you're thinking that you'd like to maybe stay in the workplace a while longer too, and your employer's not bringing up the subject and you're not hearing about it in your workplace, maybe it's time you went and were a bit more proactive on that and started talking to the employer about the possibility of being able to stay in the workforce. So how we can tackle some of this ageism, we want to certainly look at things like analyzing pay, bonuses, performance, promotion within the workforce, and recruitment statistics. Have a look at what it's costing you now every time you have to hire someone within the organization. And you can easily figure out how much cost savings there would be if you didn't have to do that each time. And if we're doing all of these things through this, what I call this lens focused on the aging, we're going to be in a much better position to be able to work through the challenges and help the older staff to work effectively in the workplace. Of course, there are things that we should be looking out for. Here's a picture here of, this is a SkyTrain system, and you can see this step that was purchased. This step was purchased, I have another slide here, I'll just show you, I might show it a little better, there we go. This is a step that was purchased essentially, I'll say off the rack, if you will. It's not a custom step by any stretch. They bought many of these for their trains, and they were bought way back in like 50, or pardon me, 80, 84, 85, something like that. If you look at these steps, you'll see the very first one is about 8 inches off the ground. The second step up is approximately 11 inches off the ground. And from the top of that step up into the top of the train is just about 14 inches. Overall, not a big issue. It's certainly not a great issue if you're going up into the train. But when you're coming out the train, it causes your knee to twist slightly and your hips to twist. And then when it was a younger workforce, there was really very little issue with this. But as the workforce was getting older, they recognized that this was going to become a problem. They couldn't find one, actually. They couldn't find something that was going to be, they couldn't find a product that had the right measurements for them. And so they had to get a little bit creative. This is simply a prototype that you're looking at here to give an idea of what the proper steps would look like. And so they're taking those proactive steps to ensure that we aren't going to be hurting people and that they can continue to work safely in the workplace. Here's another example here. These are, if we're got workers that have to do a lot of heavy lifting, if we can look for ways or devices that can help them to do that lifting, those are kind of things we need to look for. High contrast print on signage can be very helpful, of course. Increasing the size of printing and instruction on memos and labels. Using task lighting where possible can be very helpful as well. Minimizing slips, trips, and falls by reducing the climbing, working at heights where possible, marking steps and floor surfaces for visibility and anti-slip. And also remember this, whatever we do, that if we're doing it with the sort of lens, again, if lack of the right term perhaps, but this lens on helping the aging worker, everything we do or anything that we do to help them helps everybody else in the organization as well. So it is a bit of a win-win. So again, if we start looking at these things, again, they're going to benefit everybody within the workplace. So that brings us to the poll question. We are going to talk a little bit more about some of the things we can do. But our next poll question, has your workplace engaged in the process of making changes in the workplace with the older worker in mind? Okay, so quite a high number. 42% said yes, they have. 58% said no. And I also suspect there might be some cases where we don't know. There may be some things going on. we're just not sure what they are. We haven't heard about them. So that's quite a high number. I'd like to see a little bit higher than that. I think as time goes on, I think we're going to see that more and more, because I think we are starting to see workers that are recognizing exactly what I'm referring to here as the competitive advantage. So we're going to carry on talking about a few more of these things that we can do to help the aging workforce. Rotate work assignments to avoid repetitive stress is certainly a key. We've got consider and implement exercise and wellness programs. Here again, I think you have to use some discernment. You have to really have the right types of programs, the right type of wellness programs as well. I'm not suggesting for a second here that you would have buy them a gym pass and cross your fingers and hope they go. It needs to be a program that's well designed, that you know the older workers are going to be able to take advantage of. We need to consider flexible work programs, that part-time work if it's available. And I think for many of these things, we need to start looking at this with the attitude that we can do it. Can we assign work schedules that help to avoid fatigue? Multitasking, I don't think we need to go down there. I think most of us already recognize that multitasking simply doesn't work. That's long gone. We need to encourage reporting of aches and pains, right? We want to know that if people are having issues, we want to know about it before it becomes problematic. And again, if management starts to adopt this idea of this supportive attitude, that people can do it, I mean, years ago, the thought was at a certain age, you really couldn't do that type of work. And now we're finding out it is just the opposite, that there's so much value in having the older worker in the workplace. So as this slide says here, to be age ready requires that thoughtful and careful analysis of the workplace. And that's where we're kind of going with this. We're saying, look, employers need to put a plan together to look through all of the issues so that they can make clear choices about bringing the older workers back to the workplace or retaining them in the workplace. And as it says here, organizations that actively leverage the older worker will be in the best position for being able to hire and retain those older workers. As it says here, according to a report by Trucking HR Canada, we will have a shortage of 25,000 truck drivers by 2023. And that 61% of trucking jobs in Canada reportedly went unfilled in 2019, and that's expected to increase by 25% by 2023. So again, if it's for no other reason, there's lots and lots of reasons to want to hang on to the skilled and experienced workers that are already in many of our workplaces. And I'll just leave this up here for just a minute or so. I want you to be able to copy this link down if you're in that process. If you've already started on the process, but you want to get some more information on how to build all those components that you need for being able to retain the older workers in your workplace, this is a great website. They've got lots of information and can help you put that whole plan together, as well as give you lots of more tips and tricks and insight beyond what I was able to provide for you today. So that's the end of this presentation.